Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 3rd of August, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Justin Walker.
Hello again. Yes.
Now, we are going to be covering Bradbury pound and money with Justin in just a minute. One of the fundamentals, we believe, of sorting out problems in the UK. But before we get there, let's have a look at some of the critical matters, of which the weather is a key one. Grey, cool, with the odd shower here in Plymouth and problems elsewhere in the world. Now, we had a particularly deep news programme tomorrow, so beg your pardon, yesterday. So we'll start off with the critical factor today, which is climate change and those beavers. Now, you might remember that we first reported on these some time ago, I think about a year now at least, and the Daily Telegraph was blaming ground squirrels. Well, in fact, it was, there we are, December 2014, was blaming ground squirrels and beavers for contributing to global warming. This was a serious article, and it shows the state of our press at the moment. A little while later, they seemed to try and correct themselves because they then started to talk about the weather with proper weather maps. But nevertheless, a major newspaper was prepared to say that, well, ground squirrels and beavers were contributing to global warming. Let's have a look at where this leads us. Well, it led us at the time into problems up in Scotland because there was snow and the gritters were out on the roads. And of course, the damn beavers were to blame. Forecasters predict the country will be hit by unseasonably cold conditions with the possibility of snow in some of the most scenic parts of the country. So although it's cold, this is global warming, Justin.
I now know why Canada is always so cold. All those bloody beavers.
All those beavers.
Yes.
Well, it got worse for the beavers because, of course, the beavers in Scotland were also blamed for making the flooding worse. So it's quite incredible that this relatively innocuous creature is apparently responsible for every disaster in the world as far as the climate's concerned. But in an exclusive, the situation has got worse, because apparently now a giant terror beaver has been grooming senior members of the Scottish Parliament, and we've got an exclusive picture here of the creature concerned.
Yes.
Police counter-terrorist units have been informed, obviously a terrorist beaver, and they've warned the public to run and hide if they see any suspicious beaver activity. But Police Scotland have said, we don't suggest people hide near trees, as beavers can cause tree failure at any time.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, where are we? Is this humour? Is it black humour? Are we taking the mickey? Well, it's somewhere in the middle, because let's bring up this headline. This is the local Plymouth paper. It's the Plymouth Herald. And the title is, How to Survive a Terror Attack. 3 Simple Actions Could Save Your Life. So we have Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, who said it was a case of when, not if, terrorists struck again in the UK. And this gentleman, Scotland Yard Assistant Commissioner Mark Rowley, said, run, hide and tell were the 3 basic rules which could help save lives in the event of an attack. Now, Justin, I'm going to ask for your opinion in a minute, because I'd like to know how Commissioner Mark Rowley justifies this advice, because is this gentleman saying he knows better than the person who is actually on the spot of the terrorist incident? Supposing you're in the middle of a city, you see around you activity which you quickly realise is something very nasty going on. Who is the best person to decide what to do?
Well, the person who's immediately there. I mean, I can only speak as an ex-serviceman. If I felt I could have a go, and I'm not suggesting you should always have a go or anything, but if I saw an opportunity to have a go, I'm afraid I would have a go. I'm not particularly brave or anything like that, but if I'm there on the ground and I can see a weakness in what's happening, what the chap's trying to do, I'd certainly have a go. I wouldn't run, hide and tell. I would probably have a go, like any common sense individual would.
Well, the assumption, of course, here is that all these, in such an incident, you would be seeing people armed with guns. That would make a big difference to what you decide to do. But the overall advice from the police is run. And yet,
you could provide yourself a target.
You could make
it worse. You could become a target. I mean, it's common sense will kick in immediately something happens.
Right.
And I don't think, as you say, giving glib things like that. No, I think it's silly. No.
Well, if you go to the Plymouth Herald website, you can actually have a look at that video, which is telling us how we are all at grave danger of a terrorist threat in UK now, as a result of what's happened on the continent. And you now know the advice of the police, which is to run, hide, and tell the police. So we'll leave you to think about that advice. In the meantime, the poor beavers are still being blamed for global warming. Well, Scotland is very much in the headlines, and much of this is around First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. And we are astonished, really, to have to report today that the truth no longer exists as part of Scottish Government policy. Now, this relates to the Doherty case, where members of the public have been phoning Nicola Sturgeon's private office to ask whether she will intervene in the Doherty case. She did intervene in the case of the Australian family, the Brain family, and she did a photo shoot alongside that family to show support. But when she was asked, will you intervene in the Doherty case, the whole problem had been given to her head of media, Eileen Easton. And what did Ms. Easton say? She said, the line is. And the line is that the First Minister does not intervene in individual cases, although clearly she did intervene in the Brain case. So we've got the Scottish Premier Minister supporting Australians who run into trouble, but she's not prepared to actually support Scottish families who run into trouble, not only in Scotland, but also in Ireland. So just in media teams now being used to cover up and lie for the government bodies. What do you make of that?
Well, the first thing I make of it is that virtually all our elected representatives don't want to go where the truth is. The line is, oh, we don't want to touch the truth, thank you very much. That's not our department. I suggest you go somewhere else. I mean, this idea of completely ignoring the Dohertys and that dreadful case, well, to me, it's just a sign that these people are covering up paedophile rings, they're covering up child abuse, they're covering up a great deal of
criminal
criminal activity. And, well, they're going to be called to account. I mean, the rule of law will pervade. I mean, at the end of the day, these people will be eventually made answerable to us. They will be made to be answerable to us.
In restoring the rule of law.
In restoring the rule of law, which is what we're about.
Okay. Well, if anybody would like to follow this particular aspect of the truth with Nicola Sturgeon's office, if you want to chase up on this, I'll just bring up on screen at the bottom of that previous slide. There we are. There's the email address of Eileen Easton, and you're very welcome to, of course, email her and ask that she explains to you in person what the line is, where the truth is, and why Nicola Sturgeon feels that she needs to spin a line. Is this a serious matter? Well, we're going to remind you of this slide, which we showed when whistleblower Melanie Shaw was recently out of Sodexo prison. This was a leg ulcer that was untreated for the whole time that she was held in profit-making prison Sodexo in Peterborough. And we just feel it is outrageous that this is how the British state treats survivors of child abuse, not only putting them in prison, but Melanie Shaw back in prison and segregated and previously denied medical attention. We've reason to believe this is still going on. And who do we need to focus on? Well, we need to focus on our MPs. This is a good publicity shot, isn't it, with MP Chris Leslie sitting, holding Melanie's hand. He's desperately concerned about this lady. But when we ask what has this MP actually done to support this lady, the answer is nothing.
I would just say he's a coward. He knows what's going on, and whether he's implicated himself, I don't know. But at the very least, he is displaying cowardice of huge magnitude. The fact he will not go where the truth is. And again, he will be answerable to the rule of law.
Well, we've also sent emails to Mike Penning, who was the former Minister of Policing. The present Minister of Policing has also had emails in relation to the Metropolitan Police whistleblower. And much as with Chris Leslie, at the moment, there is a wall of silence from these individuals about what they are going to do to protect the whistleblowers. So we'll leave people to connect the dots on that. But we will remind people that, of course, when the BBC came under pressure as to what it was doing to protect those who had been abused or blowing the whistle, they solved the problem by sacking staff. And this was the Press Gazette article, which was actually saying that everyone on the right side of the Savile argument has been forced out of the BBC, and that's in 2015. And the same story reported here with the Daily Mail, and they actually put in a sort of timeline of events. So I had the opportunity to speak to somebody from one of the bigger newspapers this morning. We got discussing this particular topic, and the question is how do we know that this isn't just incompetence? To which my response was the evidence is now overwhelming that the cover-up is calculated. It's being done in a calculated and very cynical way. From events in Scotland, we can see it goes to the top of the tree.
Do you remember when we used to discuss the USSR, or we discussed Argentina or what have you, the phrase, people disappear, people are disappearing. I mean, Melanie has disappeared. She's been disappeared.
Into the state
system. And it really is deeply sinister. Sinister. And again, I'm hoping this is really going to mobilize people en masse to the rule of law has to be brought back. And all this stuff has got to be brought to the courts. It's just unbelievable in this day and age.
Courts.
It's the right courts, common law courts.
In front of a jury.
In front of juries.
Well, one of the things we're not seeing, Justin, is this outraged reaction from the wider public. Why is this? Well, perhaps it comes down to this. Now, I'm going to say thank you very much. Thank you very much to the viewer who picked up us saying yesterday that there had been this amazing amalgamation of the world's media, and we put up a particular diagram. And what's come back is that if you basically go and have a look at images for consolidation of world media on Google, you will find some of the most fantastic diagrams. So we'll add a bit of comment. There's a selection of some of them, but we've got the world media now consolidated into more or less one propaganda machine. But it's interesting that a lot of these don't seem to mention the BBC, so they'll concentrate on American profit-making media, but the BBC slips through the net. Is that because other countries perceive the BBC as being honest? Very sad state of affairs if they do. We don't get any mention of the subversive BBC chariot media action. That also slips through the net. They don't mention that computers are now being used to generate news stories. This is something that Mike Robinson has picked up on and reported. And of course, this is extremely dangerous because you have human journalists picking up on a story that has no truth or substance in the human world. And then we can add to this, of course, that we've got security services interfering in social media. So this is a very dangerous mix.
You remember on Sunday at the King, I quoted my uncle, who was a director of the Bank of England from 1955 to 1972, and he went to the very first Bilderberg conference in 1954. And he gave me two pieces of advice to take through life when I was only 16. And one of them was, don't ever believe anything you read in the press because we control it. At stage 16, it went over my top, it went over the top, but of course I now know what he meant.
Yeah.
It is basically the international financial banking system, the corporate system of the world controls the media, and they decide what people get to see and hear.
Right, and the more centralised that control, of course, the easier it is. So this is another article that was sent to us, and I'm going to say thank you very much to the lady concerned. So here we are, Business Insider. These 6 corporations control 90% of the media in America. And a key statement in the article was that the present network has been itself has been consolidated from 50 companies in 1983. So your point, Justin, is of course here are these huge global companies operating on billions of dollars. Who controls the dollars? The bankers.
Can I just also say that up until this year, for 11 years, I worked for the Westmoreland Gazette, a lovely regional newspaper. I was very happy there. But in turn, they were owned by NewsQuest, which owns around 70 to 80 papers in England, Wales, and Scotland. And in turn, NewsQuest is owned by Gannett Media Enterprise, or they call themselves in America, and they rank certainly in the top 10 media organizations in America. So the bottom line is a regional newspaper telling people what's happening in the Yorkshire Dales, the Lake District, and the Vale of Lune is controlled by an American corporation.
Right. And that's a very serious and sinister event, isn't it? Because many people still have a lot of trust in their local newspaper, but very few of them now are those original family-owned print businesses that were certainly in existence up to the early 70s.
That is what we desperately need, is local regional press owned by local regional business people and local people. And that way you can build up a level of trust. I'm going to say that my editor, I don't think, was ever directly affected by anyone in America ringing him up and saying. So I don't think it directly affected us, but it could well do. And as I said, these are the facts. Ultimately, a small, well, not quite small, but a regional newspaper is owned by an American company.
Right. Would it be fair to say that you have seen, or did you see things being affected by control of the budgets? We can't go and investigate this because there's no money?
Well, I mean, there was just a general lack of funding within the organisation. Investigative journalism was certainly not going to be happening because we just didn't have the people on the ground to get the paper out every week. And that was something that a lot of the journalists regretted. But they didn't have time to be able to go out there and dig into stories to find out what was really going on.
No.
So I'm afraid, yes, lack of resources and money meant that investigative journalism, I'm afraid, is just not happening.
Gone.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to continue to push on this story about the Royal Navy Type 45 destroyers. Remember that the Navy has been boasting these are some of the most powerful ships in the world. But as this training video emphasised, really, you're recruiting people to learn how to fix some of the greatest warships in our fleet. So at the moment, these ships can't operate in warm water, and some questions are being asked about the fact they're all back in port at the same time. Now, a while ago, we were reporting this, obviously the source, Breitbart, but the headline was very, very interesting. Ministry of Defence spends $105 million on reducing greenhouse gases as frontline forces are cut. This was the meat of the article. $105 million on green projects in the 4 years since 2011. So we can't get ships to sea, but we can actually sort the environment out. Presumably somebody's told the military about those beavers. We could get the remains of the army beaver hunting in Scotland. But this is the other thing. They're now suddenly saying it's a business. It refers to the military as a business that is greening itself. Now, this to me says that the internal machinery of the Ministry of Defence is breaking down because you've got erroneous subjects coming in. We can't get ships that can fight. We can't get ships that can go to sea, but we can tackle the state of the global climate.
Well, man-made global warming to me is a completely flawed science. It's bad science, as David Bellamy would like to say, always said, bad science. And most scientists who have any integrity and know the truth know it's a complete load of baloney. And to see that our defence, the security of our nation, is now dependent upon flawed science, is
It's remarkable, isn't it?
The word treason is springing to my mind at the moment. And again, I'll go back to the rule of law. These people are going to be made answerable for their actions.
Well, perhaps this gentleman could be well up in the queue, because this is Jonathan Slater. We've shown him before, Director General of Head Office and Commissioning Services and Defence Authority for Acquisition Systems and Mod Sustainability Champion. The credit is so great, it's hard to do it. So here's a picture of one of their documents, Sustainable MOD. Well, it's sustainable because it doesn't actually put any ships to sea anymore.
I was going to say, it stays in harbour, stays in port. Yeah. Yes, it's very sustainable.
And I am clear about the importance of embedding sustainability thinking in the way we do business. So here we are, we've got a public service, a vital one, defence of the nation, but this man thinks it's a business. And we think that he thinks that the sustainability issue is a key part of it. We said, is he mad or reframed? And I'm going to say, I think he's reframed. I'm not qualified to say he's mad, but I think he's reframed.
There's something very, very sad going on here. Very sad.
Well, unfortunately, the Chinese don't seem to suffer from this problem. This was a picture I wanted to bring up yesterday. I couldn't, but here it is. This is Portsmouth Dockyard, and this is from the Daily Mail. Here's the Chinese warships alongside, and they do work. And in this article, the Mail was pointing out that we had 15 times more commanding officers than active warships, with 40 admirals. We've got 66 warships at the moment.
Hang on, I've just seen something. You've got HMS Warrior there. Now, I reckon HMS Warrior, 1860-something.
In the foreground.
I think we can get her recommissioned. I think that's quite feasible.
Well, Dave Ellis suggested this is what we should do, because they could obviously build ships that worked there. But we just wanted to remind people, here he is, this is Lord Alan West. He is of the generation that started this general malaise inside the Navy. He became a big advisor to the government, but he was also very big on pirate parties. So there's the Chinese fleet, or part of it, a very small part of it, alongside, with everybody saying these are truly impressive warships. Meanwhile, we can't do it. But on the subject of China, we mentioned this yesterday, and it was the fact that an American naturalized Chinese citizen had been picked up by the FBI on charges of spying. And as well as the fact they'd had access to top secret documentation from the FBI, there was also mention of genetically modified crops, or GMO, and Monsanto and DuPont were mentioned. Well, thank you to an eagle-eyed viewer. We were pointed at this article. So here we are from Reuters. China's citizens protest Chem China Syngenta deal and GMO worries. And basically, it's quite extraordinary, this, because it represents quite a high-profile protest, great risk to these people, but 400 Chinese citizens have signed a letter to protest the purchase of Swiss-based seeds and pesticides company Syngenta by state-owned Chem China. And the people said that the deal would eventually lead to genetically modified crops being sown across swathes of the country of China. And the critics argue that the technology poses risk to public health and the environment. And Reuters pointed out that it's unusual for people to protest this openly in China. But it gets more interesting, because if we hop across to this website, Food Democracy, they've got a very informative article about this whole deal, 43 billion deal where the Chinese have acquired Syngenta. And they also put up the protest letter, which is actually signed by China's former chemical industry minister. So you can read it on the website, and encourage you to go and read the full letter. But we noticed that in this initial paragraph, it says that one of the concerns is the Blackwater Group and JP Morgan Chase are involved in arranging the US dollar 50 billion loans financing. So this brings us...
I was just going to say, can I just come in here and just say that a lot of my contacts tell me that China is considered to be the perfect template for all of us.
Right.
The way the Chinese leadership behave towards their people, the way there's full control, and the way that basically press freedom and everything else, and you've got the great firewall of China and everything else, that is the future that the global financial elite would like for us. We are to be good little consumers, but we're not to question.
Not to question the party state.
Exactly.
Those future leaders. Well, if that's what is coming down the road, of course, it's bread and circuses at home. And the latest is from The Sun, which is saying that we should all get very, very excited and start to demand the dark blue UK passports back. We can't get Tory MPs doing anything to do with child abuse whistleblowers, but they're going to jump on board the campaign for The Sun. This is bread and circuses, isn't it?
Total bread and circuses, yes. And people now, there's going to be a degree of complacency by those who voted for Brexit, whilst, of course, behind the scenes, we know that Article 50 is not going to be triggered, and we know events will happen, as I said yesterday, that will convince people that they need to stay within the European Union if they are to feel secure and protected. So what we're seeing here, I don't believe a word of it. Knowing who owns The Sun, Mr. Murdoch is fully aware of the global financiers' agenda. So, rubbish.
Rubbish. Okay, well, let's have a look at this very attractive Greek island, which you say is going to be a major...
Island, well, this is getting rather interesting. The island of Aegina. Let me just give you a little bit of introduction to this. Greece at the moment is still being attacked by the global bankers. And what's happening is that Greece's debt GDP ratio has gone up from 109% in 2008 to almost 200% in 2016, this year. And that means that the levels of debt are now unserviceable, unsustainable. Now, the IMF wants 9 billion euros from Greece by 2018, and the European Union wants 5.4 billion euros by the same date, 2018, which means there's going to have to be deep restructuring measures by the government, the Greek government, which will require selling off to public Greek assets to foreign corporations. Now, this is complete insanity. The Greek people are having their country stolen from them by a system, a global financial system that creates money completely out of thin air as debt. Now, the good news is that on the island of Aegina, some local people now are starting to wake up to this.
Okay, we'll just bring that slide back on screen, and this is Democracy Avenue here, which is fantastic. So
the reason why it's called Democracy Avenue is that Ioannis Kapodistrias, I'm going to pronounce this name right, Kapodistrias was Greece's first governor in the modern democracy of Greece. And research is starting to suggest that he actually disliked central bankers. So in 1828, the island of Aegina became the focal point for modern Greece. And today, I'm happy to say that local people on the island of Aegina are now starting to question the whole debt basis of Greece. In other words, how did we get into this situation? Why can't Greece actually create and issue its own debt-free, interest-free money based on the wealth of a nation? So I'm hoping that something very, very positive is going to start out of this initiative, and that the island of Aegina will start to influence the rest of Greece to stand up to the international financial cartel.
Isn't it fascinating that what we're now starting to see is very small groups of people dispersed in countries, but also worldwide, who are slowly but surely beginning to link up, and they're hungry for information. Well, one organisation that's popped up is this one, DM25, and I'm just going to bring a quote up, which you were particularly interested in. It's a bit hard. It says, stupid, men too stupid to think about the consequences of their actions, tricked the British into making a fatally stupid decision. Now, they're talking about Brexit.
Well, yes, this is done by a particular lady. I can't remember her name now. I've got it down there. She's a professor.
Professor
yes.
Lindsay Stonebridge.
Lindsay Stonebridge. Now, she is a member of this DM 25.
Should we just bring her up
yes,
on
we'll
screen?
Just bring her up on screen.
This is...
I don't know anything about this lady, except
there
I
we
know
are. We have a picture of her there.
She's probably a very nice lady. She's concerned about refugees. She believes that the European Union is an ideal to be kept. I think, like so many people who are good people, but they are naive about how the European Union came into existence, who is really behind it, which we know is the global financial system. And this new initiative, DM25, which stands for Democracy in Europe Movement 2025. So they want to restore democracy in Europe. That is accountability, openness, more transparency, and basically politicians being answerable to the people. These are all fantastic ideals that I agree with. But it's just so sad that they don't understand that the European Union was created by those who do not have their best interests at heart. Now, the guy behind it is it's the former Greek finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis. And I tried to approach him during the Greek crisis 2 or 3 years ago through the Greek embassy in London, and unfortunately didn't come back to me. But my friends on Agena and elsewhere are now going to approach him and say, look, please, the way forward for Greece is to take back our right to create, issue and control our own debt-free money based on the wealth of a nation. So I'm hoping that this DM25, which I think is an honourable movement, and what they're trying to achieve is totally honourable. I hope that they will at least look beyond what they're looking at the moment and look at the whole global financial system to see how they're being controlled by it.
Yeah, there is at the moment still a lot of trust by people in the system. They're very reluctant to say, well, actually,
Yes.
the whole system is broken. And I know you're being very careful and diplomatic here, because we see signs of people being able to be brought together. Yeah. Ian Crane has certainly experienced this with the issue of fracking, that you've got disparate groups. They don't agree on everything, but they were prepared to come together on the issue of fracking. So we've got something now very exciting, really,
I think
between this initiative in Greece and UK.
I feel that things are certainly moving forward. And as you say, we must always find those things that unite us and not what divides us, because the other side wants us to be divided into little groups, into little boxes, with the lids closed down so they can control us. What they don't want is everyone to lift the lids of their boxes, stick up and say, oh, hello, I'll work with you. And as soon as you get people working together, and then the common thread of how they're all being kept down, they start to wake up to, that's the last thing that the elite want. The 1% are controlling 99% of us.
Okay, and we're going to be able to illustrate this in a very simple way. But let's remind people about one of your lead initiatives for the British Constitution Group is the Bradbury Pound. If you haven't read anything about the Bradbury, go to the UK column, and there are a number of articles. This one is from your good self, Justin, 19th of November 2012, so well ahead of the game the game that we see unfolding at the moment. Bankers, Bradburys, Carnage and slaughter on the Western Front. I've got an eye on the clock, so just in a few seconds, what is the story behind the Bradbury?
The story was that up until the outbreak of the First World War, everything was dictated by the private central banks, that it was gold standard, and effectively the City of London controlled everything. But at the outbreak of the First World War, because of the uncertainty of armed conflict, they knew that the people would go straight to their banks to get the money out of the banks. And they realised that there was only about £9 million worth of gold in the Bank of England, so they knew there was going to be a run on the banks, total chaos, when the country was actually rearming. So they persuaded the Chancellor of Exchequer, David Lloyd George, to put a bill through Parliament authorising the Treasury, not the Bank of England, the Treasury, to create and issue money that was based on the wealth of the nation, okay, not money that was created out of thin air by the bankers based on nothing at all to a very large extent because they practice fractional reserve lending. And this money was literally put into the banks as paper money within 3 days. It was printed on one side only initially on stamp paper, and it was signed by John Bradbury, who was the secretary to the Treasury, and that's why they're called Bradburys. And it worked a treat, and they issued £400 million worth in the first few months of the war. Everything was running swimmingly well, and then suddenly the bankers realised they couldn't make a killing out of the killing on the Western Front. So they asked David Lloyd George to phase these out, and they went back to the old-fashioned way of the government, selling bonds to the private financial interests, who would then create the money out of thin air as loans, and that 3.5–4.5% interest. And as a result, the national debt just went skyrocketing upwards. In other words, the principle of a government through its treasury creating and issuing, controlling its own debt-free, interest-free money. And it's been done before. The colonials in America did it with colonial script. And then Abraham Lincoln did it with the greenback dollar. Even the little humble island of Guernsey has done it with the Guernsey pound after the Napoleonic War. It's a well-known, it's a totally accepted fiscal arrangement. But of course, the private bankers can't make their money out of it. Right.
Well, on the UK Column website, there is a little video which Mike Robinson produced. I think it was back in 2012 as well.
Video. Very good.
Very good video. Going to recommend that people go and have a look at this if they haven't seen it, because this is talking about the whole problem and the Bradbury pound, brings back the Bradbury pound. So have a look at that one. Now, what can we show people to say, well, actually, our politicians at the moment are just not prepared to deal in reality? You wrote to the Treasury Committee some time ago. We're just going to bring up one paragraph, but this is just to show that what we're saying is absolutely correct. Here's the letter back to you from the Treasury Committee. And this was the key paragraph, which I'll read for our listeners. I appreciate you taking the time to raise your ideas for reintroducing the Bradbury pound. However, the committee has a full programme at present. We're currently conducting inquiries into quantitative easing and macro-prudential tools, among other matters. As such, the Treasury Committee has no plans to look into this subject in the foreseeable future. So there they are busy printing money, quantitative easing. They've invented a smokescreen term, which is macro-prudential tool. What's your take on their reply, Justin?
Well, I mean, what I know now, because when that was written written 3 years ago. Now I know that just run away from us. They know that we are 100% right with this idea that the government can create, issue, and control. I mean, we're told this is the great lie. I'm calling it the great lie. That is, when a government's taxation receipts are outweighed by government expenditure. Now, once you have your deficit, that a government has to borrow that deficit from the private financial sector. No, you do not have to at all. History can prove it. The Treasury, in a controlled way, can create, issue, and get the money out there for infrastructure projects, for supporting the vulnerable in our society, for taking care of our defence.
Medicine, education.
Education, in other words, for the real needs of society. The Bradbury pound can sort that out. They know it, but you see, I call it not the Westminster bubble. You know, the media like to say it's the Westminster bubble. I talk about it being now the Westminster debt bubble. Out there in the rest of the country, people are waking up. What on earth how is money created, etc., and people are now starting to think, perhaps we're being led by people who are more concerned about the City of London than the people of this country.
Right, okay. Now, of course, on top of the Bradbury pound, we've also got other work to do, because we've got the problem of the banks, the corruption in the banks themselves. We've got to get rid of toxic debt. We've got to get rid of the bankers who are simply gambling on the backs of humanity. And I'm sure many people would say we need to get the high street banks separated away from. This is Glass-Steagall. So, is it true to say that you would see the Bradbury pound as being a foundation stone for sorting out?
Yes,
problems?
A complete foundation stone, because suddenly people will realise that money and bankers are there to serve the people. We are not there to serve the bankers and money. And one of the things I've always said is that the humanity is being put onto a treadmill of mass mindless production to meet mass mindless consumption. We need a more human scale economy. One of the other big lies is that we're part of a global economic race. No, we're not. This global economic race is the mindset that it's been created by the banking elite, because they want basically everyone to stop thinking, to chase their tails, to produce a whole lot of stuff, and to make huge fortunes for the 1%. And we've got to wake up to this simple fact that we are being dictated to by an unaccountable, unelected 1% who have grabbed power. They have taken from us the right to issue and control our own money.
Okay. Well, if we just draw your attention back to the UK Column website, there's another article that was put out here by Mike Robinson, The Construction of a Harmonious World, Sustained Peace and Joint Prosperity. And one of the quotes from Mike Robinson was this: "For years now, I've been arguing in articles and on the UK Column news programme that the Western financial system is terminally corrupt." Excuse me. I'm far from alone in that assessment, despite claims from politicians and so-called mainstream economic commentators that no one saw it coming. So that is a pretty crunchy article from Mike Robinson. And again, we are saying UK Column ahead of the game, because in 2014 we were calling out the lies that Parliament is presenting. So are people beginning to wake up? You were keen to have this little
I'm very keen to show this because, and the reason is
image on screen.
Yeah, because Owen Smith represents.
Sorry, I'll just explain it because it's a little bit small on screen. The top photograph, where we can see a few people on a green field, is Owen Smith at a leadership rally in Liverpool. It says sunny Saturday afternoon, free ice cream for attendees. And then the bottom photograph is in relation to Jeremy Corbyn leadership rally in Liverpool, where you can see it's absolutely packed, even though it's raining, and there are no free ice cream, no free ice creams for the attendees. So your point is that Jeremy Corbyn is what? Has got some sense to say? Or?
Yes, well, the point here is Owen Smith very much represents the Labour members of Parliament, and you could argue that they are the residue of the Blairite regime and all the things that went with that. He represents the Westminster debt bubble, okay? Jeremy Corbyn with his Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, they both signed Early Day Motion 748 back in December 2013 to bring back the Bradbury pound. So they are aware of the benefits of national public credit. And I think what you see here with this picture is that people are waking up. They are wanting solutions. So I'm hoping that Jeremy and John will remember that the Early Day Motion they signed, and very soon we will start to hear them talking about national or public credit to completely revitalise the British economy and to remove fear from the British people so they know they're going to enjoy prosperity, security and happiness.
Excellent. Now, we're going to end by really reminding people of what is being built under the surface, and this is coming in cross-party, so it's not simply the Tories. Much of the foundation stone for big society has been put in place by Labour with the assistance of Nick Clegg's team, of course. This was UK Column 2013, where we said the only way to show this is to get it in some sort of diagram. And the first person we're going to highlight on screen here is Saul Alinsky. So the Marxist agitator, agitation was his speciality, closely linked to Obama and directly linked to both the Labour and the Tory parties, because they tell us. But this is the model for taking control of society by saying, well, actually, you're making it easier to access for everybody. So if we have a look at what's on screen, we've got community empowerment, national citizen service pilot schemes, the opening up, that means the privatisation of public services. We've got funds being set up supposedly to help the community. We've got a social investment market, and then we've got the agitation, which is called social action. We've got a commission for the compact. Very interesting term, the compact, because for me this takes me back to sort of Soviet type ideology. But there on the right of the screen, we have got the powerhouse, which is big society capital, and who's listed? HSBC, Barclays, Lloyds, TSB and RBS. And if we animate this a bit, we can see that this goes into a very, very big network. Here's the man who spread the big lie. So Eric Pickles, also described as the pink geisha. That was in the Telegraph, check it. But he says that basically we're going to build this brave new society. The bankers are going to help us to put it together. You are going to get more freedom. But actually what they're doing is taking freedom away in the Chinese model.
Absolutely,
is that right?
Absolutely in the Chinese model. And as I said, not just a big lie, but a great lie is that our own country could be creating, issuing, controlling all the money it needs to make ensure, as I said before, our prosperity, security and happiness. And we don't need to have the banks or anyone else getting in our way. We can do it ourselves as the people of this country.
Excellent. Well, Justin, thank you very much for
thank you, Brian. I've
joining me.
Enjoyed it.
And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Thank you for joining us. Please spread the message, talk to other people, pick a simple subject, the banks, children, NHS, whatever area you feel comfortable in, and start to spread the word that something is not right. We're very intrigued at the amount of response we're now getting through to the UK column. Increasingly, we're getting people within the professional sectors get in touch with us. And as I've already mentioned today, we have contact from so-called mainstream media who are speaking to the UK column because they want to know what we think and why we're thinking it. So I think there's some very interesting things starting to happen.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us. We will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Hopefully joined by Mark Anderson from American Free Press. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.